Well, hello there, friends. How are you? I am doing very, very well. Thank you so much for asking. It's a wonderful, wonderful time to be with you, as always, here on The Working Ant with your host, yours truly, Rami Balut, for another session of The Working Ant. Today, we're going to be talking about an interesting topic of conversation. It comes up very, very often. It's typically right around this time of year where we're thinking through and reflecting a lot. In fact, for those of you that have written back and commented on my previous episode, I'm like, hey, you know what? Not much time typically happens where we'll be thinking throughout the holidays, right around Thanksgiving. Well, I can assure you, somewhere right around New Year's, you'll at least have a little bit of time to think. If not, prior to that during Christmas time. But nevertheless, it's going to be very, very difficult for any single one of us to actually get out of the idea of thinking. We're going to have a lot more time for ourselves, a lot more just to really think through how we want to conduct, interact, experience things in 2023. And then while that's a beautiful thing, one thing that I've noticed from my clients is typically this idea of, if only I had something going on for me, would have changed the course and project and trajectory of my career. If only I had that promotion, if only I had that manager, if only my organization, my role didn't get merged or acquired by another role or company or investor, how that would have changed. And there's this idea of something called, programmed rationalization. If you haven't heard my podcast on that, I strongly suggest you do. You can find me obviously on all platforms here. But today isn't about programmed rationalization, but it's almost like a form of it, and a piece of what programmed rationalization is, which is really another way of saying like there's self sabotage and rationalizing some of the reasons why we are where we are today. The if only source of question very much amplifies that. So we're always thinking like in these social herds that we're actually in on so many different things regarding trends, where our friends are, where our colleagues are, people that we've worked with in the past, where they've landed, what they're doing. And then, a lot of it has to do with making us believe that we are in need of something so that we can actually go to where it is we want to go. The issue I take with that is many of us just don't think through like, hey, you know what? Where do we go once we achieve what we wanted to achieve? So let's just say, you're an aspiring leader or a leader, and you're asking yourself like, okay, so if I had this leader, if I didn't go where I was supposed to go or where I am today, how things would have changed for me. While that may very, very be well true, so then what happens? Let's just say like if you did actually get what you had wanted all along, whether you got that lucky break you were looking for, whether you got that promotion, whether you got that increased scope or capacity. Many of times we're thinking, if only, if only, if only. And so what ends up happening is that we're fixated on this idea of if only, that we actually may even forget where it came from to begin with. And many of times, if we do like some deeper self reflection, we'll find out that it actually came from either comparing ourselves to other people, something we saw on the news, someone somewhere that mentioned something that triggered something else. And we get into this cycle where we're not really thinking so much for ourselves, but rather having all these things actually think for us that come in and impede and interject and intercept and intervene with our opportunity to focus, to think for ourselves, being proactive in nature versus the reactive of having all of this abundance of information come at us from all different angles. And so the idea here is, irrespective of whether or not like we can for certain ascertain that, hey, this is the reason why I'm believing what I believe right now, and that I do need something, and if only I had it, then my life would be better. I challenge you at minimum just to think through like, hey, what would happen if you actually had that? What does that actually mean for you? And if you really want to go further and find out where it came to fruition and emerged to begin with. All the power to you. But really, if you actually had that, what would that happen? What would then happen to you? So rather than thinking through, if only I had this, well then why don't we think about like what if I did? And if you think through like what if you did, then maybe just maybe you'll start thinking through like, hey, what am I going to do with this? Where does this actually align? Where is this actually taking me in my life? Because it's important that you actually do so. I've found time and time again from clients that I've worked with over the years is that there becomes like this obsession or almost like fixation at times with things that may not necessarily even be true to begin with. This is maybe a form of like cognitive dissonance or whatever it is that you want to call it, but mainly it's like this latching on to something that may, for some reason, have our abilities skewed, our perceptions skewed, rather, and that if they actually were to occur, then our lives would suddenly be fulfilled, suddenly would be better. When in fact that's really very much not the case. In fact, some of these things that we're striving for, I believe, are of much lower quality than what they should be. So it's almost like saying, like, hey, you know what? Every year, it's good to have a set of challenges, but are they the actual same set of challenges we're having year over year? Are they increasing in quality in some way versus some small petty things that actually distract us from what's really the essence of importance regarding like our fulfillment? So rather than saying like if only, so why don't we say something like you know um, rather than like if only something like maybe what if I did in fact have this, what would that actually mean for me? So let's just say, for example, you were saying to yourself, if only I had that promotion, my life would be so much better right now. So let's just say, okay, what if you did actually have that promotion? What if you did, in fact, achieve it? Then what? How does that change things for you? And perhaps you can start acting accordingly today with how it is that you want to be perceived as or acquire or achieve in the future, perhaps in a future conversation with a recruiter or a hiring manager, or mainly just like, updating your LinkedIn profile with something you feel much more proud of and something much more compelling, perhaps, that you could share with your colleagues or in a public setting. What would that actually mean if you did in fact achieve it? How would that actually change how you start, interacting with yourself? Would it change like the way you speak, your language, your interactions, your deliverables, the way you, coach and mentor people at work? Does it actually change the way you're able to negotiate a future salary increase? All of these things, come very, very much to play when we're thinking from a place of gap and necessity versus one of acquisition. I have what I need. I've got what I need. And if I don't have it, and realistically speaking, I'm going to act as if I actually did. And perhaps then it gets us even closer to what it is that I actually want for ourselves. And I think that, in fact, that actually sets us up for a much, much better set of circumstances in the future for ourselves. The last thing that I want you to start thinking is like, hey, you know what? You need all these things when in fact you may have not done like an audit with somebody and saying like, do you in fact need these things? Like, why do you think you really need these things to begin with? To like, hey, you know what? If you think you need these things, I'm not going to argue with you. You need them, but let's just say you had them. Then what? And what typically happens is as we grow in our careers, we start to lose our sense of selves. We start losing an association with with our identity, and it takes a toll on us, mainly because we weren't really thinking through like, okay, I got what I wanted. We got the house, we got the car, we got the family, we got the white picket fence, we got the love, we got the partnership, we've got things we can afford, perhaps. That's very, very much something that people aspire towards, and why wouldn't they? But then what? So what is that all for? And oftentimes, like a very, very good example is something we forget is like this idea of like learning. We have all this so we can do what? So we can continue learning. Learning what? Growing for what reason? You need to be aware of what it is that you are at times suffering, at minimum sacrificing for in your career. You've got to know what this is all for, what it's all about, why we're doing all this. And then perhaps you can start skewing so much of this idea of like, hey, if only I had this. Well, you know what? Maybe this is not what it is that I should be after to begin with. Maybe this is the collective. Maybe this is the crowd trying to sway me in one direction over the other. When in fact, if I really, truly, truly think about what it is that I need, it could be something else, something that propels me, something I can anchor off of in the future towards like, the state that I actually want to be at. And it may not necessarily be like, an actual position. It may not actually be an acquisition. It couldn't just really just be like how it is you plan on feeling. The most important thing here is don't come in with it from a place of like if only, if only, if only. The if onlys really don't do much for you. They're not really good for you. What is good for you is thinking through, if you actually had these things that you truly wanted, what does that actually mean? Would you value your time more? Would you value your relationships more? Would you pick up the phone and call somebody? Would you send someone a note? Get all these LinkedIn notifications. It's someone's birthday and you just, pass through it. Maybe it's a chance to rekindle some of these relationships. And maybe it's just a chance for you to think through like, hey, you know what? All of this that I'm doing, and I feel like I'm lacking these few things. Is this really what, you 5.0 would be advising you today? Many of times I would think not. All that being said, what I want you to do is just consider these things for yourself. Operate from a place of acquisition, where you've already gotten what it is that you believe that you need. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, I've got what I wanted now. Where do I go from here? And if we can generate a great state, a great emotion that keeps us in flow here, that allows us to, in many ways, skew, our optics, and see opportunity beyond the actual goal we were setting for to begin with. Well, I just think we'll be much, much better off for it. And I could swear to you that, if you take a look at yourself and you think through like, hey, what is it that I truly believe I need at this time? Much of it is actually maybe letting go of some of your belief systems. And who wouldn't want that if it actually impacts our ability to know thyself better, to strive for a greater version of ourselves, the best version that already exists within us, and we become better people and better leaders as a result of that. So that's a beautiful thing. I hope you consider that as you strive for more in your life. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Working Out. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving. I know it's a couple weeks back. I just hope you really enjoyed yourselves. I hope you had a time, just to get together with family, with loved ones, and to feel, that you're excited about the future, enlivened about the possibilities. I know you deserve it. I hope you believe that yourself. And until then, I will catch you next week for another episode of The Working Ant with me, your host and coach, Rami Balut, signing off for now. Bye.